So in my previous video, I showcased an insane one card Neptibus combo post Rage of the Abyss. And here I'm going to talk a little more in details about my card choices and what the deck should look like moving forward. But before that, I want to quickly explain why I am playing 50 cards. I feel like this deck really needs 50 cards because you just want a lot of resources in your decks. Like the Coelacanth, I feel like is important for this deck because sometimes you just feel like there's cards like the Adrian and the Teus that's not really going to cut it because you might not have good discards or just might end on a mediocre board, and going into the Coelacanth is just better because it gets to something like Toad, which is better alone than something like the Adrian or anything you're going to make with Teus. So I feel like having something like the Coelacanth, especially moving into turns 3, 4, 5, and 6, etc., you have just more pushes when it comes to the following turns so you can OTK. Because yes, you can pull up an insane board, but when you're going second or you're going to turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, you want to have those good pushes with this deck. So that is why I am playing the Coelacanth package, and I'm not playing all these terrible bricks. I'm just playing the Fishborg Harpooner because it is a card that can extend your play. Say if you normal something like Neptibus, or not Neptibus, Diva, and you have a Neptibus in hand in combination with the Harpooner, you can go Harpooner effect, discard itself, and then summon the Neptibus onto your field. And it's just like if you're doing the one card combo. So that is why I'm playing the Coelacanth package with the Fishborg Harpooner. I think these cards are very strong. Moving forward, we played the one heavy infantry. Heavy infantry, I feel like might be a 2 of or even a 3 of because it's really good going second, and it's such a insane card to have in combination with the Abyss Shrine as well as the Alacia, and it's not once per turn, so you can just keep popping, and just having this card in your resource toolbox for, again, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5 is just really insane. Dragoons, this card's self-explanatory, not once per turn search, really strong. The bodyguards in the shrine are just super insane. Like I can't stress enough how good these cards are, even though they do lock you into just playing water monsters for the rest of the turn from the extra deck. These cards are just absolutely crazy. So I think these cards are just mandatory at 3 because they just do a lot for the deck, and because you burn to so much resources with discarding with the Teus, the Ren Adgerin, you go through a lot with the Prince. It's just something you need to have in the deck as a 3 of because you can continually keep resolving your princes. And even though you have cards like the Abyss Sting or like the Minstrel that can shuffle back cards into the deck, you don't want to rely too heavily on that. The bodyguards, of course, obviously being one of the strongest cards in this deck because not only does it summon a Mermail Atlantean monster from your deck, which is your Neptibus and your Pike, but it also turns all your monsters into level 7, which gives you access to something like Abyss Gyos and the level 7 XYZ, the Dragon Deity. This card is absolutely insane going second because not only do you have the effect that non-targeting bounces 3 cards back to your opponent's hand, but it also floats into 3 level 3 monsters if it leaves the field, which is pretty insane. Well, not leave the field, let's clarify that. It's when it's sent to the graveyard. So it's really still insane for that because your opponent cannot send it to the graveyard at all unless they want to trigger all this effect to summon 3 monsters from your graveyard. So I think this card is pretty powerful for things like that, and it could just push through your opponent's board to OTK. So having this card to just give you easy access to that, as well as being able to get around the restrictions of Wuling Glacier, which lets you skip your battle phase, is pretty important. And then we have the 3 Deep Sea Diva. I guess one front is something to mention as well that can get to Neptibus, which is just a shoe-in. Like any level 1 deck, Snake Eye, any other deck, one front is just very insane. But Deep Sea Diva is a pretty tricky card. I feel like the only reason I'm playing this card, and it's kind of like Unchained, to where your deck doesn't really have that many 1 card combos, so having something like Diva be another 1 card combo in the deck it's just super powerful, even though it's such an imperm Veiler, like Ash Blossom Magnet. You still need to play this card. I feel like it's still very powerful. I could be wrong. There's probably something in the future that we'll figure out, and it might be more optimal than playing something like Deep Sea Deep. Maybe we will play stuff like the Aria just to get more access to Inept Abyss, since it's more stickier on the board and it's a lot harder to interact with. So Minstrel, I feel like this card is pretty powerful. The only thing I have with this card is we have the new Molcharmy card that is kind of like Maxi in the OCG. If you Minstrel and you send like a random water monster, not even like Dragoons or Bodyguards, just to play around a hand trap, you get heavily punished by something like Maxi, because now you not only have to play through the Maxi, but you have to potentially play through any other hand trap that they might have, even if you rip a hand trap from the hand in a heavy hand trap format. So maybe if they're playing like board breakers, then you can go, okay, I'm gonna rip the worst card in the hand so Moon Glacier can potentially hit the bad card in the hand. So Minstrel, TLDR, it's just not that great unless you're doing like the one card combo to just play around Nib, or you're just like, okay, I'm far into my combo, I only summon like 3 or 4 times, I want to hit something out of their hand for like a potential hand trap that they might have, like a Nibiru, or they're holding like a Veiler or something like that. So having something like Minstrel in the deck just for those situations is good, but having it as a 3-of to rely on it to like rip a hand trap out of your opponent's hand is just not that reliable, especially not when we're having the new Molcharmy card to where they can just chain it, or even like this Molcharmy card, because you're specimening a lot of the times from the hand, or I think it's the just want to make sure it says if you normal summon or special summon a monster from the hand. So again, you're gonna use normal or special summoning from the hand, I'd say quite a few. So with like Moon Glacier, you have the Teus, you have the Ran, just a lot. You're gonna be normal summoning like Prince or Diva, so that's like 3 or 4 cards your opponent's gonna be drawing. So you just don't want to risk it with something Minstrel to just rip a potential hand trap out of their hand. I just don't think it's necessary unless you're a little deep into your combo. So again, Ran Adrian, it's such an insane card. Like this card, it just really carries a lot of these water decks in general, but I feel like giving you access to the Gimmer Adrian, it's just so powerful, because not only is it an interruption, but it protects you from your cards being banished or be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So now you have something like Alacia, or you have the Royal Mermail. Now they have to attack into it, or they have to like bounce it with something random, or like spin it back into the deck. That's the only way they're going to actually get rid of these cards without triggering their insane effects when they're destroyed on the field. So I think Adrian is very insane, along with the Sword Soul Chinging. This card is also really insane in combination with the Abyss Shrine, because in the graveyard you can banish this card from your graveyard and discard 1 card from your to the graveyard, and you draw 1 card, which is really good because it can get you into hand traps like Ash Blossom, Veiler, etc. But also it does trigger the Chinging, which is really powerful. And then for the rest of the deck, it's just consistency and hand traps. I guess we should mention the equip spell as well. This card is just another extender, and it also shuffle back your resources, which is really nice. But at the end of the day, it's only really accessible with the Royal Mermail, unless you play the Megalo, which I don't think is really good right now in this deck with the new support, because I feel like it's just too much resource reliant. Like unless you have like Dragoons or Bodyguards in your hand to like get the value from that card, I feel like it's just not worth it to play, unless you want to get more access to like the equip spells. Again, like I just don't think it's necessary, because you just have a lot of access to like Adrian and the Teus with the card Abyss Shrine. So you really don't want to play Megalo in this deck. So Pot of Prosperity is the consistency card of choice, because it's just more versatile. Maybe you could play the Deep Sea Aria, maybe you can play just other cards in general, like the Ice Jade Cradle, which can get you to Abyss Adrian, or not Abyss Adrian, Ran Adrian, and it can also get access to Tremora, which can be another card just like the Harpooner that can special summon a water monster from your hand, say like Neptibus. You know, this card's insane. So just more ideas on what you can play for consistency cards, and then the rest of them are hand traps. Because we are in a hand trap format, maybe it will change in the future, but I still feel like you're going to be playing like 45, 48, 50 cards in this deck, because you want to have access to a lot of these cards in your main deck. And obviously you want to play cards going second, because if your deck cannot go second, it's basically a useless deck in this today's metagame in 2024 and moving into 2025. There's just too many decks that put up insane boards, so you want to have a lot of non-engine or good enough non-engine spots in your deck, unless you're like tier limits where you could just push through a lot of stuff, which I don't think this deck is as powerful as tier limits. So you need to rely on stuff like hand traps and board breakers to beat your opponents. So just to mention, with the hand trap lineup, there's not too many things you want to talk about, like Ash Blossom, Valor, Mourner, and Imperm. They're all just like standard hand traps in this current day format, and by the time we get these cards, we're probably not gonna have, you know, Snake Eye Ash be at 3, Flame Birch might be banned, original Sinful Spoils might be banned. We just don't know what's going to happen with the Snake Eyes deck, but we can assume that stuff like Snake Eye, Yubel, Tempai, Branded, like all of these decks that were very popular in this format or like previous formats is going to get hit on this upcoming ban list. So this deck will be much better in the future as well. But something like the Molcharmy Perelia, I think this is a little bit better to have in the main deck over the other Perelia or Molcharmy card, is because it's a water monster and the other one's a wind. So having this be a water monster and being able to discard it with the Ran Adrin or the Abysteus is just really, really nice. And I really like that synergy with it. So, and it's not that terrible. Like a lot of decks are summoning from their hand, or, you know, yeah, normal summoning or special summoning from their hand. So this card is still pretty good. It's not as good as the newer one, but it still will give you value going first or going second. But it is obviously, it gives you value going first because you can discard it with your Mermail or other water monsters in your deck, like the Ran Adrin. And it's also level 4. So let's say you have like Harpooner and the Perelia, you can like normal summon Perelia and then use the effect of Harpooner, discard a water, summon itself, and then you can go into stuff like Bahamut Shark and Toad. So that's just something to mention as well. And the Dominus Impulse, this is another card that is coming out in Rage of the Abyss that is pretty powerful, and it doesn't lock you really because you're already locked in the water, so you only really have to play water monsters in this deck. So having something like this card in your deck that's very powerful going first and going second is just a really powerful resource. So I think this card is just a shoe-in for this deck, because being locked into not playing light monsters, earth monsters, or wind monsters is almost completely relevant in this deck, because even something like SP Little Knight is not locked because it's a dark monster. Something like IP Masquerade is another card that's a dark. So like locking yourself out of light or earth and wind is just completely irrelevant in this deck. So I think this card is very, very powerful. And then just quickly going through the extra deck, Alacia is really good. Royal Mermail again is really good for getting to the equips, which is really powerful, as well as stopping your opponent from being targeted or targeting your own cards that this card points to with card effects is kind of underrated. We know this card from the Samorglink. Samorglink was absolutely incredible in just protecting your monsters from just being targeted. So it's just a really powerful card for that situation. I know a lot of people were saying this card was very underwhelming, but I think this effect is pretty powerful in combination with the equip spell effect. Another thing to mention is the Dragon Deity. I think this card again is very, very underrated, very, very powerful, because it just pushes through your opponent's board. If it leaves the field and it goes to the graveyard, you get to send a water monster from your deck, so you can trigger stuff like the Dragoons, bodyguards, etc., etc., and as well as just summon 3 level 3 Sea Serpent, Fish, or Aqua monsters from your hand or graveyard is just super, super powerful. And Coral Anemone was always a shoe-in for this deck, but it can give you access to the Royal Mermail, which is very, very good. Zealantis is really good in combination with the Coral Anemone because sometimes it might be a little bit hard to out bodies on the board without having like dark monsters or any of these other types that you can access in the extra deck while being waterlocked. So having something like Zealantis is just very, very powerful as well. Bomber Shark Turtle, these cards are self-explanatory. Toad is just such a powerful card. And then IP Masquerena and SP Little Knight, they're just generic cards you're going to play when you're not waterlocked. So I think these are really good. And then again, the level 10 synchros are really good with the combination of Abyss Adrian, as well as if you have like Minstrel plus like Teus, you can also get access to something like the Adrian or the Qingying, which is really, really nice. And just other cards to note in the side deck that I was testing, like the Gun might be good for some combos as well. I just didn't want to play the extra brick in the deck, which is why I'm not playing the Mizuchi in the main deck. It will most likely be a side deck card. Other stuff that might be side deck cards or even main deck cards in general might be Abyss Dweller, because not only is it a powerful card going first, it's also a very good card for just boosting your monster's attack, because you already have something like Abyss Alacia that boosts the attack of your monster's discard points to by 500, but also having the 500 boost from the Abyss Dweller means that something like Toad becomes 3200 attack, which is pretty good. And then the Typhon might be just something you could play just as a shoe-in as well. Just going second just makes it much better. Another card is the Aura Whale that can be pretty good for just getting rid of your opponent's board, which is really good. The Ravenous Crocosaur, this card is also really good because with Diva and Teus, it gives you access to this card, and it's also an interruption. So I think this card is good as well. And then the Bryonak is something I played with the card that's called Lapis Dragon. But you don't play that card anymore, but you still have access to it if you have like a Diva and a Dragoons, or you have like Minstrel and Bodyguards, or Minstrel and Abyss Shrine. You have access to it as well. So just something to note as well. As well as having Harpooner plus like Heavy Infantry could be like a way to get to Brionek as well. But yeah, that is it, guys. Let me know what you guys think about Mermail Atlanteans. I think this deck is going to have a lot of potential moving forward. It just depends on if Snake Eye is still going to be this dominant engine. I don't think it's going to be a deck when we get this new support. But do you think this has a chance against something like Tempai that will probably still be playable? Yubel, which will probably still be playable. Does it lose very hard to something like Ritual Beast and, you know, Fluunderies that play Shifter? What are we going to do to beat those decks as well? Will we have to play, I don't know, Talents to kind of like hope we could rip a starter from their hand, and, you know, just something like that. So enough rambling. I am done with this video. If you want to see a replay of this deck, I will showcase that in the future. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. I am out. Peace.